Welcome to Upstate Impact, the podcast that explores the stories of business owners, leaders, and influential figures shaping upstate New York. Each episode uncovers their path, the challenges they've faced, and the impact they're making in their industries and communities. And now, your host, Luke Cometti.
Margaret Dietz.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Excited to dive into a lot with you. From the first time, I've known you for years, but from the first time I've worked with you on a professional level, I've been very impressed with your whole process, and I really want to dive into it. But before we do, why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got to the point of starting Dietz Creative?
Yeah. So I went through the communications design program at Syracuse University. It's in the School of Design. And I kind of mentioned my education first because it really is what shaped me.
Did you know going to college that you wanted to do something in design?
Yes, I did. I found that program. I mean, I've always just been like kind of an art nerd, I really liked copywriting. So actually, instead of doing design or art classes in high school, I actually was in journalism because I really liked the layout of the pages and doing the copywriting and all of that kind of stuff, the research. So I actually not to get into this, but I went to college without a portfolio because I loved art, but I chose to do the journalism side. So needed to like scrape together a really horrible art portfolio to get into the design school. But
when did you make the change? When did you decide, hey, I got to put a portfolio together?
When I found the communications design program, and you can't apply
okay.
and
so
without a
you
portfolio.
wanted to pivot from journalism side of it to the design. Okay.
Yeah. And that was high school journalism. So it was like the school newspaper, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had to really I spent a semester at Syracuse, not in the communications design program yet, and kind of taking some art classes and putting together some work, but eventually got in. And, I think every designer is drawn to design for, the sexiness of it, right? Like there's something that's like sparkles to them about like, oh, that's a really cool logo, or like, how did they make that or something? So like I definitely had that in me, and just fell in love with it, and fell in love with the program. It was a very difficult program, and I learned a lot, and a lot of how I feel about the program is very much in retrospect. I teach in that program now, which is why I mentioned this, because it really did shape me, and I have so much respect for what it taught me, and everything I learned in it, I now apply to how I do my own work and how I approach design. So anyways, I went through that program, came out of it as a kind of your traditional art director in the agency world. I worked in the Connecticut area and the New York City area for some global agencies on global brands, did my time there, right? So I was an art director, and then I in that a couple of years of experience doing that, I was like, wow, I really like copywriting. And I always had these two things that I enjoyed, but at that age, you have to pick, right?
Yeah.
You're not at the director level where you can oversee all the things. And so I had a boss at one point in my life at Chase Design named Doug Whitehouse, and he explained to me this picture an hourglass. I think this is really important for young professionals, young people, to kind of understand this. It's kind of changed my perspective. If you picture an hourglass, and the base of it is when you start your career, right? The open part of it. And you're just like taking it all in, and you're kind of wide, right? And you kind of have to learn, and you have to do a bunch of things to kind of get in there and prove yourself. And then you get to the middle of the hourglass, and you start to get a little bit more specialized. So this is like your senior level kind of people, mid-level kind of people. And you start to get really good at something, and people rely on you for that thing. Like, wow, Margaret's really good at this. We're going to keep going to her for this. And then as you keep growing in your career and you get older and you become more of the director level status, you're starting to get wider again, right? You're starting to oversee everything when you get to the top of the hourglass. So I really struggled with that like middle part of the hourglass, that specialized, because I really like design. I really like to write. And I was flipping back and forth with those two roles when I was younger in my career. I had a role like working at an agency called Momentum in New York. I worked on Coca-Cola and I was just copy. I didn't design. I didn't tell anyone I could design. I did this like little experiment for a year.
So you try to focus on the center of the hourglass.
Yeah, and I kind of switched because I was like, do I want to design? And I found out I really missed design. I really like the copy part. But again, I was at that center part of my career. I wasn't director level yet. I wasn't old enough. I didn't have the experience. So I kind of struggled at that point in my career, which led me to, I had a boyfriend upstate at the time where we're from, up in Syracuse, now husband. And he was up here getting his master's. We were long distance, and I just missed home. And, the agency life is difficult just in and of itself. The hours, sometimes the people you work with, like it's just a different culture. So I ended up moving home and working at a company, local company. It works on global brands, but so it was a really great opportunity. But Chase Design, still a great company in the area. Worked there for I think like 6 years, and did a lot more of that, like overseeing. Like I got a lot more experience with all the parts of the process, the design, the copy, the strategy, I did a lot of facilitating and workshops. Also led a lot of like big, quantity of people kind of workshops, and facilitating brainstorms and how we come up with concepts and how we then synthesize that information and that data to get to design work that solves a problem. So I had a lot of great experience in that company. And ultimately, I wanted to start a family. Again, agency life can be difficult in that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's, not to get on a tangent here, but I think it's not talked about enough from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like the desire of just like wanting that lifestyle or that freedom or that particularly like having a family. When people choose to have a family, it offered us like the lifestyle that we wanted to when my first daughter was on the way. So I got my foot in the door at Syracuse and started teaching a little bit, and I started Dietz Creative.
Yeah, I think having a balance for an entrepreneur is key. I mean, everyone has a tolerance for how much, specific work they're willing to put in. Probably depends on what part of their life they're in, right? You're single in your 20s, you can have maybe a little more of an appetite to put in those 50, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks.
100%.
Where once you start having a family, you don't want, your kid's childhood to go by and be like, where the heck was I?
100%.
And so I think it sounds like you kind of found the right balance for you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, the transition from Syracuse going down to the city, right? You had a pretty specific major with design. How did that translate to your first job out of college?
Wonderfully, because that's what we were really set up for. Like that was what we were training for. And the program has a wonderful network of alumni and connections. They at the time, we do it a little differently now just because of like life has changed with COVID and all that kind of stuff. But at the time they did a physical portfolio show in New York City. They brought all of our books down. All the agencies in New York came to the show, saw your work in your physical book, sent you a note and hired you from there. So They set you up. I mean, it's just a wonderful program in that way of just like how connected and passionate people are about what that program does to you as a person, right? It teaches you how to think, and it teaches you how to solve problems that sounds oversimplified, but I actually mean that in a much more powerful way with it being oversimplified. That like, I make a joke all the time that if I wanted to ditch design and like do literally anything, I feel capable to do that because of, I mean, it sounds kind of egotistical, but it's just because I feel like I was taught how to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's like, who can say that about their education? Like, that's so powerful. I love that. I'm so blessed. So.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you bring up. You're very fortunate that it directly applied to what you went into.
I know, and not a lot of people.
How many people
so
graduate?
Lucky.
Like, I have no idea, or did something completely different, which in hindsight, I don't think anyone usually has regrets in that regard.
Right.
But
right.
It's kind of nice when what you went to school for applied.
I know, like
to
as a 18-year-old, I knew what I wanted to do, and I found the program to do that. So yes, I do feel very blessed in that way. Yeah.
You moved up to Syracuse. You worked with a firm up here.
Mm-hmm.
At what point was it the family that you decided, hey, I'm going to try to give it a go on my own?
Yeah. Yeah, I was expecting my daughter. I kind of sometimes you're looking at your bosses and their lifestyle. And of course, they're not in at usually the phase of life that you're in. But, sometimes you're looking at them. And if I was taught from an early age, if you don't want to be your boss, you're probably not in the right job.
Yeah. That's a good saying.
Yeah. So I had a wonderful experience there. I learned so much. I'm so grateful to them. So it's nothing, it's not a knock on them by any means, but just from a lifestyle standpoint and where I was in my life, I didn't see how it was going to work based on all the things, childcare payments and like that, what was ahead of me. So I decided to give it a go. And again, I was really desiring that, me being able to hone in on all of these aspects of the process, right? Because I am a little unique in the fact that I really enjoy design and I really enjoy writing and I really enjoy strategy. And usually a brand or a person, starting a business comes to me wanting branding. To get all of those aspects of the process, you would have to hire a firm. And again, I don't mean to sound egotistical, but it's part of the reason why I felt a little confident, let me give this a go. Let me see if I can hone in on my own process and achieve everything from starting to strategy, developing messaging, developing design. And I'm like a one-man band. Let's see if I can do it. It took a couple of years, trial and error to get my process down and to, it's a little bit about education too, to my clients of what my process is, why it's important, why you need all parts of the process. So the teaching experience that I've had, teaching in communications design also has helped me hone in on the education part to my clients about branding and about design and about the process that we're going to go through.
Sounds like you were ready to get to that bottom part of the hourglass.
So, yeah, right. I didn't want to be put in a hole anymore, of a hole, I guess, corner is what I mean.
Yeah.
Of here's your role, you do this. I was ready to kind of oversee the whole thing and I guess do it myself.
You're ready. You're giving it a go. I assume your business was your first client in a way, as in, your first by yourself, designing your brand strategy and focusing on your logo, things like that. But I guess outside of yourself in your company, I'm giving it a go. Where'd you start? Did you just start reaching out to people who had businesses, or did you just start advertising? How did you go about that?
So this was in 2019. I think I just started talking around to my friends, to my family, hey, I'm open for business. Does anyone need branding? I was particularly looking for new businesses, right? New and small businesses at the time.
Yeah.
And I believe my first client was a speech therapist. She was my age, and she wanted to go out on her own in the same way I do. And that's why I love what I do, is because typically I am working with new or small entrepreneurs who I see myself in. I get it. I wanted to go out on my own too. Let's do this together. Let me help you. So it's nice to be able to support them through their journey, because I can totally relate. So to answer your question, I think one of my friends was oh, I know a girl who is starting. Yeah, I think it was very word of mouth.
Yeah. Because that's, I think, how obviously I knew you from a personal standpoint, but all of a sudden you start ramping up social media, and but also kind of word of mouth, where I start seeing some of the logo and designs that you've made. And when we started our company, Get Reps, we had Reps was your initial name. We kind of changed what we were doing. We just started with a very basic logo that we had someone make for us. Mm-hmm. And, we were raising money, and we're like, all right, we're going to be a legitimate company here. We can't just use this logo that we paid $50 for. That's when, you came to the picture, and I'm not going to lie, Joe and I had no idea what the process was, what you were kind of because you're not cheap. In hindsight, you're very much worth the money.
Thank you.
But you're not, $50 on Fiverr to have someone make you a logo.
Totally.
So we just didn't know. And we're but I think this is necessary. We've seen some of the companies that do it. And then you took us through that process. And from that first call, where I think we talked for over an hour, and we're just brain dumping everything, from what we're doing, what we did, what we plan to do, or what we might do this way. And we just kind of let loose and told you everything, and you're just asking these probing questions to keep us talking, and you're like, all right, give me a week. And we're like, all right, we didn't know what was happening. And then all of a sudden you were able to kind of take everything we did and put it to paper and then figure out, what the message is, how we want to portray ourselves. Not just like, this is what you need to do. Hey, are you guys thinking more like this? You thinking more like this? But it was just able to take everything that we were thinking and put it down on paper and be like, oh, yeah, no, actually, this is what we want, or that's what we want. Like, you just clarified so much for us.
Yeah.
So
good.
I guess
I'm so happy. This is like warming my heart. Okay. Yeah.
But, obviously we're not going to go through every little thing you always do, but maybe talk a little bit about when working, especially with maybe smaller companies, just each step in the process that you bring to the table, and that, what's going to be different than, hey, I'm just going to find a cool logo and that's going to be our
right. And to your point about pricing, and obviously when you're an entrepreneur and you're working for yourself, pricing is hard and there's always imposter syndrome, and so it took me a while to get to a point where I'm like, this is industry standard. Like I am good at what I do, and I am charging from an industry standard standpoint. And it's worth it. Right.
Exactly.
And to be confident in yourself like that, of course, I think everyone that owns their own business is like, okay, but what if they say no because it's too much? Well, I'm also not here to work for free. I had one of a friend in our district growing up, told my dad once, like, your enemies don't buy from you. Right.
True.
So no one's contacting me that, hopefully I don't have a lot of enemies, but no one's contacting me that doesn't know me. It's friends and family and words of mouth and in our community. Right. So you got to charge to make your own money, to make money that is fair, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say that is that it just took me a while to get confident in that. But
I say you charge, when I say you charge a lot, not a lot compared to a firm.
Right.
You're, a steal compared to a firm.
Right.
It's just, sometimes people think buying a quick logo or using an AI generator is sufficient.
Is worth it. Right. So yes, exactly. So, I say it to that, like, clickety click on the internet somewhere for $50, for $100. You can sure AI can totally spit you out a logo, but what I am going to offer you is the partnership and the thinking and the meaningfulness and the strategy behind how we're going to build this together. And that session that you were just speaking of, it's called my discovery call, right? So I'm getting a whole download for my own creative brief for my own strategy. It's like, I usually end up, it sounds so corny, but like, I've cried on these calls with my clients, right? Because this is their baby, and they're pouring their life into it, and I'm like, oh no, I feel ya. Like this is so great. I'm so happy you're doing this, and like where it more times than I can count, I have cried on calls with clients, because it's so wonderful to help them build it. So that strategy part, while it's not like I say the sexiest part, right? No one's like hiring me to be like, let's see the strategy you can make me. They want the logo. But the strategy part is really meaningful, and it usually like really crystallizes what people want to do with their business, how they want to position it, how they want to message it. And it, I think, helps someone get excited because they have clarity over what they're going to do and how they're going to make their money and how they can really bring this to life. Then enter the logo process, which is super fun because, that's visualizing what we just talked about. And, based on how, however pricing or the scope of work works out, I typically explore a few options of logos, and that looks like, do we want to emphasize this or do we want to emphasize this? And just kind of, it still goes along with the strategy, but like, how do we want to visualize this? And then my clients always have feedback, which is great. And then I refine, and then we move forward with all the things that I think people, again, are not as educated on in terms of branding, that are beyond a logo, because a brand identity is way more than a logo. It is all of the other parts of a brand that you need to activate that brand. So I'm talking fonts and colors. Sure, people kind of like can understand, but beyond that, custom icons, patterns, how are we going to deal with imagery? Like, right? Like, is there a consistent way we're going to take this photography? What does that look like? Just the layout indications of like what your website's going to look like, what documents are going to look like, marketing materials. Are are things going to look like big and bold and oversized? Or are they going to look refined? And all of these things play into the brand identity. So it's just so much more than that logo. But I think that's what people are wanting, you know?
Yeah, to go back to that story, we literally thought we were just getting a logo. And you talk about that discovery. It's like in hindsight, we realized, holy cow, the logo, you know, was great and it was awesome. But like that's such a small part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole discovery and just having like a path forward of how we're going to set up our website, how we're going to set up our booth at a tournament, you know, how every, you know, color we're going to use is going to be consistent through every post on Instagram.
Right.
All these things, you know, mission statement, vision statement. I had no idea.
Look at you.
You know, well, it's not that I didn't have any, you know, you read about that stuff.
Yes.
But I didn't realize that was part of,
exactly.
as part of the whole process with the logo.
Totally.
And not to mention the logo, you're like, I'll have 5 for you. You had like 12.
I know,
you're like, I was having fun with it.
I get ahead of myself. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, so for the people that, you know, and I can understand if you can't afford the whole thing, and people just need a logo. I understand. There's parts of building a business that, you know, there's reality involved.
That was a question I had. When is the right time to hire you or someone like you? Because, you know, if I just have an idea, I wake up, hey, I want to start this business. I'm not sure if it's wise to go hire someone like you right away, right? You probably want to prove the concept. You want to maybe have some money coming in. Maybe you have a better idea. When would be the right time?
I mean, honestly, that's exactly what I would say is like, you kind of got to get your feet under you a little because, you know, and just prove it out a little, actually quite a bit of thought around it, right? I can help organize those thoughts, turn it into what we were talking about, that strategy, but you got to come to me with like you know, I probably wouldn't, to put it in a better way, I probably wouldn't think it was a good fit for me to work with someone that was just like, hey, hopping on, I just have this idea, wondering what you think. I'm going to be like, I have all the questions, but you also should have like a lot of answers at this point. Let's do our research and get back to me, you know?
Could be a lot of wasted effort.
Yeah.
Because when you're that early, you pivot. You don't, you know,
totally.
Just because you have one good idea doesn't mean it's a business.
Yeah. But at the same time, there is this, I think, part that I see in some of my clients that they're at a point where they've done as much as they could do without branding. They don't necessarily have all of the money to invest in branding, and they're kind of looking at some of my pricing, which, by the way, I'm happy to make custom pricing for people. I really try to work with people on that. But it is an investment, right? And so you're looking at that investment and you're like, I don't know if I have that investment, that money right now. There is a point that sometimes you got to like get through that, right? Just like anything else you're investing in your business. I think that sometimes that deters people a little, and it's like, no, that's probably a good thing. There's probably a point where you have to invest a little in order to get ahead of things, right? In order to move on. So it's sticky, you know. It's a personal choice, but I see it in a lot of things. Yeah, I see people at different points coming to me, but usually when people are buttoned up and they know that this is the next step, and they have all their research done and they have a point of view on how they're going to bring their business to life and what their business fundamentally is when I'm like, okay, let's go. It sounds like a good fit.
Yeah. And like you said, you're pretty flexible. You're not like, this is my price for this, you know, take it or leave it.
Right.
Obviously you need to make money. It's a business for you. However, you can work with people. Some people maybe have a higher budget for it, but if I'm a local business here that says, you know, Margaret sounds great, I want to get her involved with my brand strategy, how do you recommend that they just set a budget, come to you with it, or just have, it's probably just a conversation?
It's usually just a conversation. I have a sheet that breaks things out into packages so that it's somewhere to start so people can get an idea of my pricing. But usually I say if something in here is not working for you, or you don't need X, Y, and Z at this point, or, you know, you only have so much money and this is your budget. Like I do try to make custom proposals, and custom scope of works so that I can help people. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to help. You know, of course, I have to make money. Everyone has to make money, but I do just want to help. So I do try really hard to put together custom stuff if people do come to me with a very specific budget. Yeah.
Is it ever too late in the process? Or not really? I mean, because you can always kind of rebrand.
Yeah. So if it's too late, quote unquote, I would say it's a rebrand. I don't think it's ever too late for a rebrand. but sometimes that's just extra work on my client's end and my end to just undo what we have, what's out there already, particularly if it's just like poor messaging or, I mean, of course we can just delete things off the internet, but they exist or someone saw them and now someone has this perception of your business that you have to undo, right? So it's worth undoing.
Yeah. I mean, how often do you see a rebrand that you're like, oh, that was terrible? Usually it's, especially with a smaller local business, it's usually for the better.
Right.
They're taking that next step in the company.
And it's usually, if I'm being honest, someone that kind of like put together their brand in a scrappy way at the start. Fair enough. We're all doing our best.
Getting things going.
Yeah. And then it's usually not I haven't seen it in like a bad case scenario, like, wow, they really did an egregious job and I have to undo it. That was a little dramatic of me to say, but usually it's just like, yeah, let's make this better, right? Let's refine this and be very intentional about what we're putting out there,
Today's episode of Upstate Impact is brought to you by Renewal by Andersen of Central New York, the window and door replacement company setting the standard for quality and craftsmanship. If you're looking for durability, energy efficiency, and expert installation, Renewal by Andersen delivers. Their exclusive Fibrex material combines the strength of wood with the low maintenance benefits of vinyl, providing a stronger, more beautiful, and longer lasting solution for your home. With their signature service, every step, from design consultation to professional installation, is built around convenience, expertise, and long-term value. Their industry-leading process ensures a smart investment that enhances both comfort and style. Click the link in our show notes to set up a free quote today and take the first step towards transforming your home. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. You've worked in the tri-state area, with a big firm down there working with companies like Coca-Cola, mm-hmm. Procter & Gamble, mm-hmm. Hewlett-Packard.
Yeah, HP, yep.
HP.
Yep.
Now you're working more local, probably smaller businesses. How has your process changed?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or how, because maybe you weren't doing everything for them. Obviously,
right.
They're a large company and you're part of a firm doing it. But like, how do you approach it differently for a national company and a local company?
That's a good question.
Or is it not very different?
I guess I would say I haven't gone through this same process with a global company, right? I'm not rebranding Coca-Cola. And you're part of the small part of the hourglass doing one specific thing. Totally. And for what it's worth, I actually didn't work on branding. I worked in retail and experiential. So I was working on brands at certain touch points of those brands, which is usually like that customer experience in store, or some experiential event like Amex in an airport or Amex at a Knicks game or, oh my God, I don't know, like a billion things, So I think I took what I knew from all those experiences. Also, not for nothing, it's just the way my brain works. So this is what I would say to young designers, if young designers are listening, like we teach a process, a creative process. My creative process is not some novel, crazy thing. It is pretty much the creative process. But what other people couldn't replicate, right? I could put that content out there today, like what my process is. It's not like someone could steal my process. It's just I go through this process and my brain works a certain way and I can produce something a certain way. And that's special for me, but also like the next designer, that's special for them. We all have different brains. We're all producing different work, right? That's the kind of the nuance and the subjectivity of design, is like we all add our own spin to things. So I mean, not for nothing. It's just I found myself being able to do a process in the way that my brain could wrap its head around, because when we're in a firm or an agency, you're forced to do a process in a way that is dictated by the company. And a lot of the times you're butting heads with people because, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, could we try it this way? And it's just, there's just tension there. So it was really freeing to be able to just like move through a process myself.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard.
Yeah, totally.
Any big company trying to get something done,
yeah,
as opposed to a, whether it's a startup or a small local business, lean. Hey, we can move things quickly, and you could probably get a lot more done. And it sounds like that's, kind of the theme of this, is that you wanted to do the whole thing, and it can help you do that with these smaller companies.
Don't get me wrong. I don't love working by myself, right? I miss the collaboration. I have found that piece of it teaching. So my colleagues that I teach with are wonderful people and brilliant designers, and I can bounce things off of them related to my personal work or my Dietz Creative work to them. So like I have a few mentors there, friends, mentors, colleagues that have supported me through this as well. So it feels like I have the best of both worlds there. And so if I would recommend finding to people that are kind of their own one-man band in that way, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, I would recommend finding some sort of network that can also support you, collaborate with you. You can bounce things off of, because working by yourself, I mean, it's nice. It has its benefits, but it also,
goes back to the balance. It's nice sometimes, but you need that broader network for support.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. How did you get back involved with Syracuse? When you were moving back from downstate, did you just reach out and say, hey, I want to get, I want to teach, or I want to be a professor up there?
So I was, just had it in my brain from my experience as a student that like, wow, that looks like a really fun job. There's no clients involved. Not love my clients, but the rub, right? So you're just talking about design all day, right? With eager students that are just like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and like want to learn from you. It just like looked so fun. So
I will say one thing. Now I can appreciate it, and I think I would enjoy it. At the time, I don't know if that's what I had in my eyes.
Fair enough. Totally understand. So I was working at Chase Design up here, and we made appearances in my comm design classes because there's other comm design alumni that worked at Chase Design with me, and so we would go and speak for a class, or pitching Chase, essentially, like, when you graduate, come work with us, right? And so I just kept in touch with my professors in that way, and then I was in this kind of pivotal, like, I'm expecting, I'm thinking I want to go out on my own. I need a little income, just in case that doesn't work. Yep. And I just thought like adjuncting would be a good way to get my foot in the door back into something I knew I loved in this program that I felt really passionate about. I just reached out to the program coordinator and a few times, waiting for something to kind of pop up. And a class did pop up that I currently teach, and I've been teaching since 2019. It's kind of my staple. It's not a comm design class. It's an InDesign class. It's a software-based class. But I got my foot in the door teaching that. I've been teaching it for a long time now, and I love it. And then I was able to just get into other comm design classes being adjunct when people would go on sabbatical, so I've had like quite a bit of experience doing comm design classes now. So I'm kind of a part of the team there in that way, even though I'm not full-time, but it checks quite a few boxes for me at this point in my life.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How have they changed since you were sitting at those desks in 2011, 12, 13, and now to today, 2025? And I guess it's a two-part question. How have the students changed? Right? You think about a kid in college now had a much different upbringing in the sense of what they were exposed to, screens and just access to information. I'm sure they have some strengths and some weaknesses compared to when you were in college, but maybe talk about that a little and what kind of comes to mind.
Yeah, and it's honestly the same trends that brands, if we were to talk about like where I think brands are going, it's the same thing, right? It's the future, and these students have grown up with such technology and access that they expect immediacy. Sorry, and they might. It's harder to kind of keep their attention on something. So we've had to be creative of how we're conducting class and how we're really engaging the students, and it's not their fault. It's a generational thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of all about that. I think that's the biggest difference. So we just work to meet them where they're at. And again, it's kind of a nice challenge. Keeps me on my toes. Like, sometimes I'm not that old, but I feel old when I'm trying to engage with this younger generation. So it's a nice challenge. Yeah.
I have a theory.
Sure.
Way beyond my expertise, but I just want to know your thoughts on this. So, and you've seen posts of this like on social media, and it's been a trend for probably the last maybe 20 years of kind of slimming down design, right? Becoming more basic, more clean, right? A lot of these big corporations have really kind of come to a much more clean logo, clean image. Does that kind of coincide with when, screens and computers and the access to information, all of a sudden now you can play a game whenever you want, you're busy, that it's like now when you go to McDonald's, it's just a clean logo, boom, boom, boom. It's not the elaborate colors and, designs that it used to be where it's like, all right, you're sitting in your car the whole time, waiting, boom, McDonald's with all these colors and everything, where now you can be playing on your, phone. You could be playing a game the whole time where now it's just a clean, we're going to stop here. It's not like information overload.
Yes. So exactly.
Am I onto something there?
You are onto something. Yes. I mean, exactly. And like, it's having, I think it's twofold. I think it's moving into a very modern era, right? Like, so like things are just getting more clean and contemporary. Fair enough. Just from an aesthetic standpoint by itself. But yes, the cleanliness and the streamlined, I'm going to call it messaging because it really is like communication, right? The streamlined communication of these brands needing to cut through all that noise. You're absolutely onto something. That is exactly why I think we're getting so, I guess, minimal, clean, or something like that. But the thing about that is then we need to be extra intentional about what we are showing, how it's communicating. If we don't have this like big flashy thing that we see consistency, we're like, oh yeah, that's the McDonald's logo or whatever. And we're just seeing like a simple M. This is a kind of a poor example, but because we all know what McDonald's is, but we just see a yellow M. Like that yellow M better show up the same way in the same yellow every time. That's when the consistency is really, really important once we get really, really streamlined. So all of the things I preach to my clients about consistency and follow these rules. We made these rules, right? We're using this color this way, like, and it seems so structured, but it's for their own good because branding is about consistency.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost harder to recognize when it's so basic.
When it's so basic,
and then you're going to have crossover with other brands, right? How are you going to know the M is not, Mitsubishi, it's McDonald's.
So it's funny because that's a trend, but another trend is ultra humanized. Right? So these compelling stories behind a brand that we just want to connect with the human behind it. So even like the most corporate, the most finance-based brands, having that human touch to them is this other trend that we're seeing that we just want to know, like, talk to someone, right?
Yeah.
People really aren't tolerant of those like skeezy corporate personas anymore. So that's another part of it is like, how can we be clean and contemporary and cut through the noise, but also feel like there's a human touch there? And that's a really hard balance to strike.
Very hard.
But we try.
Well, I just think of some, you watch a commercial sometimes now and it's like, I don't know, they're at a football game and it's, a son and a dad enjoying themselves. And then it's just like Ford. You're like, wait, how...
Totally.
Cars?
That's a great example.
And I'm like, it's almost like why that doesn't even really connect. I understand based off what you're saying why they're going that route, but it sometimes almost comes off phony. It's like, come on, you're a car company. Like you don't need to act like you're, my cousin or something.
Totally.
So I guess that's probably a hard
good and bad examples of it. Yeah. And that's what creatives are for, to tell those stories and visualize the stories and communicate these things. And I love what I do. It's not easy though. And it's and it also opens you up to a lot of critique, subjectivity, scrutiny. Like I've had to really get past that and just put things out into the world. And it's If people like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. And I kind of just have to be okay with that because I'm doing my best and I'm trying to do something meaningful for my clients. And, you know, it's easy to create something and have someone look at something and then have them have an opinion on it.
Of course.
And that's my good life. That's my career. It's taken me a long time to kind of grow a thick skin about it. But I mean, I think that's the burden you have to take on when you're creating things.
Yeah. But we've had nothing but a great experience working
thanks.
with you, Margaret.
Thanks.
And if someone listening to this wanted to get in touch with you to potentially work with you or ask you questions, what's the easiest way to do that?
You can check out my Instagram. You can DM me there. You can email me at margaret@mdietzcreative.com. I mean, I would happy to jump on a call with anyone to just talk through, you know, where they're at and how they might want to use my service and go from there if it's a good fit.
Awesome. Thanks,
And
Margaret.
also, hey, wanted to say thank you to you too. Luke, wonderful entrepreneur, and like the listeners are really fortunate to have you hosting all of this, and people in the area that are doing the same thing because having worked with you a few times now in your ventures, it's been great. And so they're lucky to have you do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for this episode of Upstate Impact. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to subscribe and share. Stay tuned for more stories from the people shaping upstate New York. See you next time.